Yeah, the Formula One season resumes after a 4-week break, and some people may have seen it as a 4-week cooling off period following the fireworks at both Silverstone and the Hungaroring prior to them packing up for the summer. We do have a humdinger of a title race to come in the second half of the season to help us look forward to that. And what may come this weekend at Spa is Rebecca Clancy of The Times. Rebecca, you're very welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me back.
As I mentioned there, we're in for a bit of a humdinger of a title race, but it does feel like we needed a bit of a cooling off period after the explosions, the fireworks and the crashes that preceded that 4-week break.
Yeah, we certainly did. I certainly needed a break. I took 2 weeks off and just saw my family. It was quite nice. Yeah, we did. I mean, the last two races, Silverstone and then Hungary, were brilliant, weren't they? Silverstone, we saw the big crash between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, and then in Hungary, we saw all sorts of carnage. I mean, how long is the show? We could be here all day talking about Hungary. We saw Max Verstappen taken out by the other Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas. We saw the strangest scene ever of a restart and Lewis Hamilton on the grid on his own because Mercedes made the wrong pit calls. And actually, Red Bull have come out today and said that those two crashes that Max Verstappen had in those last two races, they can't use the engines anymore. So that's all adding to even more drama, and it's we're starting back, as you said, in Belgium, and it's a really, really frantic schedule. We've got 5 races in 6 weeks, so it's back with a bang.
So what situation do Red Bull find themselves in terms of engines? Because that adds to the degree of uncertainty. I mean, if you're going into the second half of the season just trailing your main rival by 6 points, it doesn't really augur well that you're having to change engines midway through the season.
No, it's not great. So at the moment, the regulations state that teams can use 3 engines a year, and Red Bull have now used 2. And if they use more than that, then they have to take a penalty. And obviously, any penalty now, that's going to be a grid drop. So wherever Max Verstappen he qualifies, he'll have to be dropped down the grid 5-10 places. And that's not what you need when, as you say, the battle is so close. Lewis Hamilton's currently leading him at the moment, and you can't afford to be dropping any points. You know, we're 11 races into this season, heading into the 12th this weekend. There's only 8 points between them. And that just shows you how close it is. So these engine penalties, they are big for Red Bull. It's not great for them at all.
How likely is it to be, like, if we've already gone through 2 engine changes so far this season, how likely is it to be that they'll hit on a third? Because that kind of uncertainty only breeds... Go on.
They definitely will, yeah. There's no way. I mean, it's a funny thing with the calendar at the moment. So Australia's been cancelled, and now Japan have just cancelled as well. So we don't actually know what the calendar looks like or how many races there are remaining this year. But definitely they'll get through it. And definitely.
The calendar itself is something we'll get to, but as regards, like, we're talking about certainty and we're talking about, you know, confidence in your own machines and all that kind of thing. Lewis Hamilton going into this second part of the season, I mean, you're going to, because they're your own team, but he certainly has been talking up that, you know, Mercedes are on an upward curve, and he's definitely going to see the benefit of that, he feels, going into this part of the season.
Yeah, I spoke to him earlier today, actually, and he was pretty confident. So they have brought upgrades from the last few races of the season, which they were pretty happy with. And actually, they were saying that they worked actually better than they were expecting. So they found a couple of millitenths of a second more than they were expecting from those. So that's good for Mercedes, because they needed that behind Red Bull. Red Bull did have the fast car, and Mercedes had to do something. So Lewis is very confident going into the second half of the season. And do you remember as well, he said at the end of last season that obviously the car wasn't his only issue. He's very strongly hinted that he was suffering from long COVID. And we said to him earlier, just, you know, how are you basically? How was your rest? And he certainly needed the break. And he said, I feel fine now. It's not a concern for me anymore. I'm coming back. I feel healthy, fresh. If anything, I thought the summer break was too long. I've been eager to get back for ages. I'm almost certain he's the only one who felt that it wasn't long enough. And so, yeah, he's ready to go. So, you know, the two sides of it, Mercedes have got a car that's improving and he's feeling better. I mean, that's not really what Max Verstappen wants to hear. Yeah.
I mean, to put it in terms of another sport, like they often say one of the best things you can do in terms of football or even in rugby is to score just before half time. Hamilton certainly did that with that victory at the Hungaroring, and that's going to put that, I guess, kernel in the back of the minds of Red Bull and Verstappen going into this part of the season.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because heading into Silverstone, so the last 2 races, heading into Silverstone, Max Verstappen had a 33-point lead, and you get 25 points for a race win, so you can imagine psychologically how massive that is. And then somehow Lewis finished the year in front, and he didn't win the last race. He came second because the person, Sebastian Vettel, who finished second, was disqualified. Again, this is what I'm saying. This race was so bonkers, we could talk about it all day. But he ended up being second, so his lead went from 6 points to 8 points because of that disqualification. And as you say, it's that all-important goal going into the half-time, and then you have all the momentum. And also, you go on holiday and you think, actually, I don't have a 33-point lead to make up anymore. I'm in the lead. And actually, maybe just one more pina colada.
Maybe just one more. What, like you're mentioning him in terms of relaxation. I'm kind of curious about the COVID situation with Formula One, because obviously they're at the mercy of other countries. We've seen Australia, we've seen Japan have to cancel their Grand Prix for this year, and that's, you can understand their reasons for that, for their different paths out of COVID. From the Formula One itself point of view, like, what's the situation like with that? Because it is this massive travelling circus with loads of different moving parts involved. How strict or otherwise are the protocols involved, both for people like yourself who are following the season, and for the teams themselves who are going from country to country and bringing a hell of a lot of different people and different outlooks with them?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see, my beautiful hotel room behind me here in Belgium. It's thankfully I haven't had to spend too long in it, but the protocols are so strict. So, for example, we don't get any special dispensation. So we arrived yesterday on the Eurostar. I immediately had to go and get tested at a Belgian PCR test centre. And then I had to stay in the hotel until I got my results back, and I have to isolate. And there's a couple of colleagues who haven't had their results back, so they weren't able to go to the track today. I did go to the track because I had my negative test. Then I got tested again today at the track, and I'll be tested again on Saturday. And then I'm flying home on Monday, and then I'll be going back out to Amsterdam on Thursday. And in between those two trips, I'll be tested twice, and then in Amsterdam, I'll be tested twice again. So it's a lot of testing, and we have to isolate. We have to do whatever the country asks of us. And so, for example, with Belgium, we had to isolate until we got our results, and we just have to do as we're told, and that's fair enough if that means we can go racing. Do you bizarrely get into the rhythm of that kind of thing when it becomes so frequent and it becomes almost the norm? Yeah, you sort of just get used to it. Because people say to you at home, "Oh, testing's so annoying, organising it, paying," and I'm obviously I'm lucky my company pays for it. And it's fiercely expensive, and I'm sure there's a bit of a racket going on with it all. You just get used to it, and you find the companies that are good and you can trust, and you'll get your results back quickly, and who to use. I mean, I have to say, you never get used to having a swab shoved up your nose. No. But you do. Like you say, you get into the rhythm. It's fine. Yeah.
On Hamilton himself, you mentioned today that he seemed, quite relaxed going into this part of the season. It's a difficult headspace for him to kind of operate in, because yes, he's after taking that lead, and he looks like he is an imposing figure heading back in the grid, but also all the focus is on him. It's a difficult balancing act for him, I guess, to strike that relaxed pose while also very much eyes on the prize, very much knowing what these next few races, especially this kind of rapid fire chunk, is going to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a pretty relaxed guy, actually. Strangely enough, for someone who does what he does for a living, I think he gets all his adrenaline in that sort of hour and a half of racing. But he was on pretty good form today. He was relaxed. We were asking about his health, and as I said, he was upbeat about that. He just has a tendency to turn up in the second half of the year, though. The business end of the year when it really matters, and he just turns it up a gear, and he always has it in his locker as well. So 2018, I think it may have been, the Singapore Grand Prix, and he'd spent, I think it was Italy before, and then we were all flew to Singapore, we were all shattered and whatever, and he'd been all around. I think he'd been to Japan or China and the New York in between, and he turns up to Singapore, and there's loads of questions about his travelling and his state of mind and what he's going to be like, and he puts in his best ever pole lap. He's just got this ability to switch on whenever he needs to, and he's really good at that, and he loves the pressure. So he talks all year about, for years gone by, about how he wants to be battling with the best. He wants someone to be pushing him for the race wins, and he loves that. He doesn't want to just trundle along and win another championship, and he knows that it doesn't look great on him. He's driving the best car, and he's won another one because he's got the best car behind him. He wants to be fighting. He's a racer, and that's why we saw him sign a 2-year contract to stay on, because he really believes that Max Verstappen is going to give him a good battle for the next few years. That's what he wants. That's what he lives for. That's what every racing driver lives for. As tense as this rivalry has been, does he almost appreciate Verstappen in a way for the fact that he gives him that yin versus yang kind of complexion to a season? Yeah, I mean, they couldn't be more different drivers. They couldn't be more different people. They have massive respect for each other. But we saw that ball over slightly in Silverstone, and it was interesting talking to Lewis in Silverstone, because he was saying, Max is the one he never gives in. He's never giving me any room, and I'm always the one having to back out. And now I find myself in this position, and I've had enough, and I'm not doing it anymore. And we saw the consequence of that in Silverstone, and they do have big respect for each other. They don't pretend at all to be friends. They don't need to. It's all kept on track, and that's what makes it so interesting. But, we also have the added element as well that Lewis Hamilton's 36 and Max Verstappen's 23, and they're at very different ends of their career. And that 13-year difference, it does make a difference. And we heard on the radio, one of the earlier races, which I forget off the top of my head now, and Lewis won it. And his race engineer, Pete Boddington, came on the radio and said, not bad for an old guy. He's making a point of it. And he really enjoys that. He's like, young kid, back in your box. It's still my sport. I'm still good enough to be here. 36 is nothing, and that just adds another dimension to it.
I still have that image in my head of Lewis Hamilton racing cars on Blue Peter as a kid. So to hear that he's being referred to as the old man and 36 is not doing well for my joints, I'll have to say, Rebecca. Kind of make me feel a bit ill.
No, yeah, me too. I'm 37, so I like to consider myself to be young as well.
Yeah. On the Verstappen point, how do you feel he'll handle this? Because he's still young. He's still, as you mentioned, 23. Hamilton has proven himself in the second half of the season, year in and year out. How able or otherwise do you think Verstappen is to handle this rivalry in the second part of the season?
It's a funny one, because he is young. He is 23, but this is his 7th season, so he's not inexperienced. He's got a girlfriend now, Kelly Piquet, who has a child, and he's sort of got this unit at home, and I think that's kind of actually grounded him somewhat. And Sir Alex Ferguson always had this thing about how he wants his players to get married young and have families, because they're not distracted and they can concentrate on just being professional footballers. And there's sort of a sense with that with Max as well, that you just say, he's got this family unit now around him. He's really calm and relaxed, and he isn't making the mistakes that he used to make when he was younger in the first few seasons. He is much better at treading that line between risk and reward, and knowing when to make a move and when not to make a move. He just also knows the car and himself a bit better. So I think in terms of the pressure and how he'll handle it, I don't think we'll see any let up, and I don't think he'll start making mistakes. And I think he has got the capability to go all the way, and I think this battle, actually, the title fight will go all the way down to the last race in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. Does the uncertainty about the season and the layout of the season and the fact that there's still a couple of blanks in the schedule, does that add to things, or do they all kind of take that in their stride and take races as they come? Because last year, I guess, showed that as being a case in point, because things were so jumbled and things were so last minute arranged in terms of an F1 season that they can almost handle it this year.
Yeah, they definitely can handle it. And I think with a racing driver, as long as they've got enough time to learn the track so they know what they're doing when they get there, they don't mind. I mean, they'd go racing every weekend if it was up to them. Personally, for the rest of us, we who don't get private jets out on the Sunday night, we would like it to not go back to 23. We'd like it to be somewhere around 2021, which I think is probably a bit more realistic now, to be honest.
Yeah.
It looks like we're going to end up with 4 races in the Middle East to finish off the season. Looks like Qatar will come in. We'll probably have another race in Bahrain, and then we'll finish with, as scheduled, Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
But they don't mind. They'll race wherever they're told to race.
They're happy out. Before you go, I want to touch on this documentary that's after rearing its head, because the Michael Schumacher story is essentially going to be coming to Netflix shortly, and this is the first insight really that we've had to Schumacher's life since the crash. I know there was quotes from Jean Todt about a week or two ago where he'd actually gotten to visit him, and he said that he was learning to deal with the obstacles that have been put in front of him. They've been exceptionally private. I don't know if you've gotten a preview of this or how much insight is going to come out of this documentary, Rebecca.
I wish I had a preview. So do my sports editors. It's a really tricky one. So as you can imagine, it's huge, and particularly in Germany, where he was is still revered. And I've been speaking to a couple of my German colleagues, and they aren't so convinced by what we will find out from the documentary. So, for example, Jean Todt, the former still the FIA president, a former Ferrari team principal, I should say. He visits Michael like once a month, pretty much. He goes pretty regularly, but we don't know anything about his current state. We, as you say, he's incredibly private. Corinne, his wife, makes sure that no one knows anything. Sabine Kem, who has managed Michael since forever and a day, she has a very tight knit around it. There's a rule within the paddock that we aren't allowed to ask Mick Schumacher about his father. So it's an exceptionally closely guarded secret. I would say it's a very interesting documentary because Netflix have a tendency to do these kind of things very well, but I'm not convinced we're going to learn that much, if anything, from what I've been told.
Corinne seems to keep a very tight rein on things. I mean, it's testament because everybody's nosy. Everybody wants to know, what's the latest update, etc., etc. I mean, we had that story about Jean Tot's quotes about visiting him, and it did massive numbers because it's a rare insight. And this again is going to be a rare insight into somebody who, even when he was racing, I guess there was still that element of there was a public veneer, but you didn't actually know who the real Michael Schumacher was.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we do now. And it's like you say, when Jean Todt says something and you sort of, if you read into the quotes, don't you? You try and think about what you can get and garner from them, really. When Mick Schumacher talks about, because, he talks about his dad, he mentions him, he has a tendency to talk about his dad in the past tense. And, you sort of read into that what he's trying to read anything into it, I suppose. And Sebastian Vettel was actually talking about the documentary today because obviously as a fellow German driver, Michael Schumacher was his idol, his hero, and they were very close when Sebastian Vettel got into racing. And just Vettel was making some comments today about documentary, just saying that, it's really sad, the situation that Michael finds himself in, and they just don't really know how much he's aware of. And so, yeah, it will be interesting. It will 100% be interesting, but I'm not sure how much we'll learn from it.
Yeah, September 15th, I believe, is when that's going to land on Netflix, and I'm sure it's going to do massive numbers for them as well. But for now, Rebecca, we'll let you get back to the wonderful surrounds of Belgium and to Spa and all that kind of thing, and enjoy the racing this weekend. And fingers crossed, we'll touch base with you later on in the season, and I'm sure there'll probably be a hair's breadth between Verstappen and Hamilton going forward.
I hope so. I hope it will be a very good end to the season.
Nice one, Rebecca Clancy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.